I'm not gonna lie, this is the most nervous I've ever been doing this. Today's Torah portion, Leviticus 1:1 to 5:26. It could be a very short and simple Torah portion. It's about the sacrifices. And I don't think I could do much better than Heather did last year when she talked about how we carry Christ with us and the impact of that coming from this portion. I had no idea what to say about this, and honestly, I'm still teetering on still not knowing what to say about this. I could talk about how revolutionary of a justice system this is, that for one, it's all public. Going to offer the sacrifices, you're there in front of everybody offering these sacrifices for your sins. And now, sometimes we can't even talk about the little bitty sins that we do. You think about that for a second. Your friend looks at you and says, hey, Joseph, I saw you last week at the temple offering this very specific sacrifice. Like, you want to talk about that? Like, that's kind of scary. Or the fact that there is no price gap in God's justice system. September of 2012, September 2nd, I turned 18. And got my license for the first time, and by the 30th, I'd gotten my first speeding ticket. Actually, my only speeding ticket. So, but I remember that specifically because there was a friend of mine at when I was going to high school that got one almost at the exact same time. But the difference was, my parents didn't help me pay for mine, and I had no money. And I thought that was going to be the end of the world for, what was it, like $140, something like that. And he was paid off, before he even went to court. And I thought, man, that's unfair. He was able to get off a lot easier than I was. But if you look at God's justice system, if you're not able to afford one sacrifice, he offers an alternative that has the exact same effect, though it doesn't cost the same. So your rich neighbor who's able to pay off his sins with a grand ox that just it triples whatever you could offer, your sins are still just as equally forgiven just by bringing a pigeon. I could talk about how I used to marvel at the Israelites in this time period. Because when you look further into the prophets, God's biggest pet peeve, or his biggest thing against his people, was that not that they were doing wrong necessarily, but they were doing wrong and still doing all the sacrifices as if they had done no wrong. It was just a thing for them. And I'm thinking, how are you going to bring this live animal with you, kill it in a pretty brutal way, and still have no thought to the actions you've done? And then I remember, don't we do the same thing with Christ? And isn't he a little bit more than just a live animal? We just check him off of our list that, I can do this wrong thing over here because Christ has already forgiven me, as if there's just not even a second thought to the impact that actually has upon him. How can we forget the way that he was slain and the way that he offered his life willingly? It marvels to me because, I can sit here and point fingers and say, all my brothers and sisters have done that, but, and somehow try to sweep it under the rug that I still do that. I think the part that really I had to step out a while ago while they were singing because I was praying to God saying, I don't know what to say about this. And he goes, no, you do. You just don't want to. Because it can be so easy for me to not tell you guys how just a few months ago I lost my love for God. And I did, and I'm still struggling with that. I teetered on the brink of wondering, do I feel anything other than loathing for God? As I'm standing there in Utah wondering, I keep feeling like I go from place to place in life, but I keep feeling like I'm following you, and yet I'm not getting anywhere. And I compound all the mistakes that I've made along the way, but then I place them on him, like, God, why are you doing this to me? And I wonder how easy it can be when you're standing in line there, going to the temple to offer your sacrifices, looking at the goat or the lamb or whatever you're going to offer, and wondering, like, God, why are you making me kill this animal for the things you've done? You're trying to place all the blame upon him, because it can be so easy to do that. I mean, look at all the blame we try to place on everyone else for our mistakes already. I mean, you can't tell me that you've never been in a place where you're wondering, like, God, you're the reason for my mistakes. And I think that's the whole point of the sacrifice, is that in that moment, not only do you have to confront everything you've done, but everything you've done confronts you, and it's just you and God in that very intimate moment, and you're vulnerable, and he's vulnerable. Because the entire time, even before Christ came, the sacrifice was a picture of what he was going to do. You got to wonder, I wonder, every time that God looked at the sacrifices, if it recurred to him what was going to happen one day in the future to him. Every single time a lamb was brought. I wonder if that hurt physically. And in that moment when it's just you and him, and it's whatever you're sacrificing, whatever you're offering, trying to make things right between you and him, the kind of argument that must happen in that moment. To all the married couples, how easy is reconciliation between you two all the time? Is it just as simple as saying, honey, here's this, I'm so sorry I did this thing, and they just go, oh, it's okay. And it's easy like that, no argument, no, oh, well, it's your fault, oh, it's your fault. You've never done that? I'm sure you haven't. For the past few months, I've argued with God. We've gone back and forth. I'm starting to see it his way now, a little bit. I'm still trying. But he's got a few good points, at least. It can be so easy to overlook the necessity of it and even the mercy of it. It can be so easy to look at the sacrificial system and be like, man, that's brutal. How could God want us to do that? To animals, to anyone. That's just brutal. But seeing the mercy in it, seeing the grace in it, seeing his love in action, that he would actually offer us a way back to him after all that we've put him through. And it doesn't matter if you've missed a sacrifice or two. See, within all of those ways of offering a different kind of sacrifice, it doesn't say what to do if you've missed a couple. What if, you commit a sin and you don't feel guilty about it and you just go on about your day, just kind of forgetting about it, and maybe half a year later you're like, you know what, I want to try to get, I need to get back right with God. How many sacrifices do I need to offer? Well, it's the same sacrifice. You see, he doesn't keep a record, doesn't keep like tally lists of all the wrongs we've committed, just the fact that, hey, you are sinful. If you want to get back right with me, here's your way to do it. Please take it. I know you've done more than your fair share of the work of all the bad things. I'm willing to let that all slide. Here's your way out. And it's our fault that we don't find that reconciliation, because we never say sorry. We never find a way to bring ourselves to the bottom on our knees and say, I'm sorry for what I've done. Make me right again. And in our deepest, darkest moment, Christ comes. And he says, I am your way back. And it's no coincidence that this Torah portion comes just 1 week shy of Passover, to remind us, before we get to that point, of what that's really about. Sorry. And I'm not saying you have to get it all right today, because Lord knows I don't. Lord knows I'm still struggling with this, and I'm still walking this out myself, trying to fall back in love with the God that I know loves me so much. And that troubles me so much. But I pray that if you can take anything from this Torah portion, it's that no matter where you're at, he's calling you to him. And he offers every way to do it. And he's willing to put in all the work. All you have to do is say yes. And I think that is the most novel idea that can come from this Torah portion. The only thing you have to do is accept it. He's already offering the forgiveness. I wish it could be so easy for us sometimes. I don't think there's anything more I could really say to that. But Shabbat Shalom, and I hope you'll have a wonderful week.